Okay, welcome everybody. This is the stream of Warsaw Maya meeting, and we will put the link, and shortly we will begin the conference. So please excuse us for because we are opening this channel right now, and let's see you in 20 minutes. If something, please skip the video. Wait a second. How is it? Here's it. Okay. Okay, so here you can watch the conference, or what would you mean? Oh yeah, you can watch the conference, which is streamed on YouTube. Okay. To watch the conference. Streaming. Okay, let's go and check.
Może zasłonić to jeszcze tylko.
Session now?
Nie mam nadzieję,
Tak,
no a tutaj jeszcze, to każdy nic nie musiał być na filmie.
ale jesteś na konferencji.
W sensie robisz transmisję.
Tak, już leci, jest na YouTube.
Łączenie jest.
Tak jest.
Agnieszką.
Na jest kanał Warsaw. Okej, mamy dwie osoby, które nas oglądają. Okay. Please wait. We will start in 15 minutes. We will start in 15 minutes the conference, and right now.
Nie wiem, czy jest super potrzebne. Boże, stół! Nie czysz!
Cześć Saszo. Cześć. Jak tam? Wszystko?
No, taki trochę niewyspany, ale...
Tak, właśnie się zastanawiałem, że nie zrobiliśmy tego wczoraj.
Najpierw skomunikowałem się z Włodarczykiem i ja powiedziałem, że będzie
W tej chwili co? Jest ta transmisja na żywo, mogę Ci dostarczyć link, jak szybko podejdziesz nie zrobić, masz jakąś listową listę?
No i wiedzą. Jest.
Tak, no to ja widzę.
Właściwie nie reaguje.
Mam jakieś telefony, ale nie działają.
The best is the copy. Which one is mine? All of them. To Dorota będzie wiedzieć, na model jest Marek.
No wiesz, no ja...
Profesor Żydowski, ale
Subscribe to USB.
Dobrze, ja idę. Przepraszam cię bardzo. Muszę pójść.
Na dole jest pokój do Ola, Igor, tak. Albo ja tak, nie masz swojego tego, nie wziąłeś. A my to? Chyba to samo. Uno sienta muchísimo en Dios mío. Bueno, vamos a ver. Panie Michale, z którego używamy? Z tego, tutaj leci transmisja.
Exactement. Sì, non so come si
Igualmente, sí. Me alegro que...
Co zamknięty? No to zaraz się coś pokombinuje.
Hay más presentaciones sobre el centro de México y casi, bueno, la mayoría, 4 o 5 presentaciones para cubrir este de escritura náhuatl, que parece que es ahora bastante el foco de la atención.
sì, sì,
Bueno, Eric Velázquez, Hermann, ahora sí va a venir y bueno, pensé que ya es venido de Dinamarca, pero les voy a mandar la información porque ya tenemos todo una así, claro. ¿Cuándo fue Nikolaj, to moja wszystko do wyjścia. Stasiu, czy to później pierwszy o...
Pisados con los cabras porque estamos streaming.
Yo voy a hacer un stream live. Sí, sí. Sabes, aquí está mejor, ¿no?
Creo que está bien. A to może na pierwszej części.
Nie ma jeszcze tak samo. Ja chcę dla 24, książkę 44. Oczywiście specjalnie. Dobrze. Ja muszę usiąść tam, żeby mieć dostęp do kontaktu. Bueno, entonces un poco empujado porque yo tendré que pasar por Gracias. Może ogłosimy ogłosi, że czekamy na pana pracę. Na Salasa.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We will be delaying the opening of the conference shortly because we are waiting for the arrival of the attaché for the cultural affairs of the Mexican embassy. So I would say we will run 5 minutes more. Thank you for your understanding.
Może tam, panie Michale, ma pan jakiegoś pomocnika, którego pan poprosił na relację, którego może na dole, żeby nas zabiło. Ya está. Que bien estuvimos esperando. ¿Cuánto gusto? Tome asiento. Quisiera presentar el director del Instituto de Arqueología, el doctor Julia, Stanisław Iwaniszewski de la Escuela Nacional de Historia de México, que ustedes conocen, y el otro premio, el profesor Nicolai Kruger de la Universidad de Oro, el profesor Ivan Price de la Academia Slovena de Ciencias. Gracias. Logramos disfrutar mucho esta noche de usted. Espero que sí. Voy a hacer toda la presentación. Muy bien, gracias. Bueno, por favor, ya, perfecto. Entonces, panie Michał, w kolejności dyrektor Instytutu może pan radca, a potem już zacznie.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a great pleasure to welcome you to the second Warsaw Maya meeting. And just because we are starting with a little bit of delay, to begin shortly, I will present Dr. Ha, director of the institute, to open the conference, and then we have the special guest, the cultural the attaché for the cultural affairs of the Mexican embassy in Warsaw, Mr. Imi Salazar, who will also say a couple of words of introduction, and then we will start the proceedings with the following. And of course, Professor Jukowski is one representative on another organization. Thank you very much.
Do I really need it?
Totally not. I'm too old to use the microphone. In the past I used it, but right now I probably don't have to because of many reasons. So generally, ladies and gentlemen, it's a big pleasure for me and honor to welcome all of you on the second BIA meeting, as my colleague already announced. It's always a pleasure for us as the academic group of scientists, scholars, and that we have such an opportunity to meet each other, discuss, and have a good chance to exchange your points of view, exchange your ideas, and share and probably during the conference we hear some inspirations for our further research. Sorry that I'm not speaking Spanish here because it's rather required, but my Spanish doesn't exist any. And so, but also, I have to say that I feel a little bit uncomfortable because generally, but as far as I know, the conference language is English anyway, or Spanish.
English.
It doesn't really matter. Okay, but I'm pretty convinced that English is quite understandable. So once again, welcome you very warmly in the name of myself and my colleagues and the group of scholars who are close to the Southern America, Central America archaeological experimental research. And I wish you good stay in Warsaw, good opportunity to discuss and have a good time in Warsaw and feel good in our institute. Thank you very much. So the main person who is responsible for the so right now your turn, please.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you in name of the Embassy of Mexico. Gracias por estar aquí, al público hispanohablante. For the embassy, it's always an honor to be invited in this kind of events, not only because Mexican culture has many things to offer to researchers and to everyone interested in the knowledge of Mexico, but Mexico, it is a proof that archaeology is not a boring science. It is, on the contrary, very interesting. Every day we have new discoveries, and I want to thank especially Professor Jukowski for this invitation and all the academics of the University of Warsaw, because they are pioneers in the investigation and research of the Mexican culture. So once again, thank you very much. Thank you for coming this day, and the embassy is very honored to be here. Thank you.
Bueno, yo voy a hablar en castellano. Con su permiso. Bueno, señora de la Cultural, estimado señor director, colegas de la Universidad de Bonn, de la Academia Eslovena de Ciencias y otros invitados, estoy muy contento de estar aquí y poder inaugurar este simposio. Ante todo, quisiera hacer una pequeña referencia de carácter histórico que nos permitirá explicar por qué estamos aquí tratando de arqueología en general de las Américas, y es un poco gracias, no voy a ser modesto, a dos personas aquí presentes que han sido reunidos por una casualidad hace exactamente 43 años. Me refiero a Stanisław Iwaniszewski, aquí presente, y a quien les habla. Hace exactamente 43 años, más bien ya casi 44, estos dos, un especialista por aquel entonces en arqueología de Mesopotamia y que empezaba a trabajar sobre cuneiforme, tomaron parte en una expedición al cercano oriente y estaban muy lejos de las Américas. Pero vieron los dos que saben colaborar conjuntamente en el campo y cuando unos años después ocurrió la posibilidad de empezar trabajos en el Perú, nos fuimos los dos a la expedición polaca a los Andes y tomamos lo que se puede hablar del virus latinoamericano, los dos, ¿no? El virus mío es un virus endémico de la región andina y aquí estoy. Por casualidades que sería largo de explicar, Stanislas cogió la otra versión del virus mesoamericana y más exactamente mexicana. Es gracias a él que Stanislas desarrolló, estando en México, donde hizo su doctorado, una investigación en materia de arqueoastronomía. Y es gracias a esta orientación que él tomó en su carrera profesional que tenemos hoy día esta posibilidad de tratar de los asuntos de arqueoastronomía maya con la presencia de tan distinguidos colegas como el profesor doctor Nikolai Grube, el profesor doctor Ivan Schreitz, por mencionar solo nuestros destacados invitados que vinieron de afuera. También tenemos otros que están esperando una comunicación vía Skype que estarán por nosotros de esta manera presentes. Y los recuerdos y el pasar del tiempo que está relacionado con recuerdos, nos hace pensar en otros colegas que ya no están lastimosamente con nosotros, pero que contribuyeron grandemente al desarrollo y la formación de los adeptos, tanto de arqueología de las Américas como en particular de la arqueoastronomía. Estas dos personas de los que nos recordamos mucho es la profesora doctora Elżbieta Siarkiewicz y el magister Robert Sadowski, a los que está de cierta manera dedicada en memoria este simposio. Gracias por su presencia, espero que van a disfrutar de los debates, de las ponencias y con esto empezamos la conferencia, salvo un detalle más. Quisiera agradecer al profesor doctor Miloš Giersz, presidente de la Sociedad Polaca de Estudios Latinoamericanos, por el importantísimo aporte, también económico para que conste, a la realización de este evento y un aplauso, por favor, al presidente Giersz. Por favor. Otra persona que tengo que agradecer es Stanisław Iwaniszewski. Ya hablé de él, era idea de él, y por esto logró reunir de tal manera este grupo importante de personas. Stanisław, muchas gracias por tu contribución. Un aplauso a él. Y last but not least, como dicen los norteamericanos, el magister Michał Gilewski, que ha tomado la responsabilidad de la organización y bueno, espero que no habrá fallas en esto. Gracias, señor Gilewski. Con esto podemos pasar al programa.
So, I will switch. Disculpa, me voy a cambiar a inglés. I will go switch back to English, and now I would like to invite our prestigious first opening speaker, Professor Ivan Schreitz.
Przepraszam.
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit stressed. It's so. Yes, I would like to announce Professor Mikulska from the Institute of Iberian and Ibero-American Studies. Thank you very much.
Buenos días a todos. este idioma, que también fue con el que trabajamos mucho junto con la profesora Sienkiewicz. Me tocó el gran gusto de presentar su persona en este simposio dedicado en su honra con el Sadowski. Entonces, unas palabras para recordar a ella. Ella nació en 1941 y falleció recientemente en el año 2018. Fue latinoamericanista, como ella misma se definía, pero en realidad era mesoamericanista, aunque este cargo, digamos, esta especialidad no existe como tal en Polonia. Pero también era antropóloga e historiadora y mucho más, porque era de estas personas que trabajaban de forma interdisciplinaria y multidisciplinaria. Era conocedora investigadora de las cuentas calendáricas mesoamericanas, de las más complejas, y asimismo de los códices mesoamericanos. Y ahora sí, tanto de los mayas, como el que vemos aquí a la izquierda, el códice Dresde, como los códices del centro de México. Toda su vida toda su vida profesional, digamos, estaba trabajando en la Universidad de Varsovia. Sobre todo estaba relacionada con el Instituto de Estudios Ibéricos e Iberoamericanos de la Universidad de Varsovia, pero en realidad empezó mucho antes, cuando el instituto empezó a existir como cátedra, de iberística. Y ella fue de las primeras personas que trabajaron allí, que lo formaron, y que luego, gracias a su trabajo, esta cátedra fue convertida en el instituto que tenemos hoy en día y que se encuentra aquí al lado. Estos son los años cuando trabajaba ahí, de 1973 a 2011, cuando se jubiló. Y ella también fue directora de este instituto, en aquel tiempo cátedra. Y justamente muy poco después la cátedra fue convertida en el instituto. Después de que se haya convertido, ella fue jefa del Departamento de Historia y Cultura de España y América Latina, donde hasta hoy en día tenemos el número más grande de investigadores que trabajan sobre México, tanto de época prehispánica como colonial, como moderna y contemporánea. Pero no es el único lugar con el que estaba relacionada y donde trabajó, en la Universidad de Varsovia, porque también es importante su trabajo en el Centro de Estudios Latinoamericanos, que conocemos como CESLA. Ahí fue la primera vicedirectora en los años 1988 hasta 1991, y luego siguió trabajando ahí como miembro del Consejo Académico hasta el año 2002. Entonces también resalta su trabajo en el desarrollo de este importante centro. Pero también, y seguramente aquí muchos de ustedes se recordarán, también durante toda su vida fue miembro de la Asociación Polaca de Estudios Latinoamericanos, que conocemos como PTSL, y también fue presidenta de esta importante asociación de 1999 hasta 2001. En el instituto, aún cátedra, junto con el doctor Janusz Wojciechak y junto con el profesor Stanisław Iwaniszewski, fueron los iniciadores de la revista Itinerarios, hoy en día creo que de las más importantes que tenemos en la Universidad de Varsovia y reconocida en toda Polonia. Pues fue el trabajo de los tres para iniciar este importante proyecto, que luego retomamos los alumnos suyos y con otros colegas. Tengo que decir que la profesora Sienkiewicz, si yo tendría que presentar, si me toca presentarla, creo que estamos hablando de la ciudadana del mundo, en todo el sentido de esta palabra, porque ella nació en Gran Bretaña. Poco después de su nacimiento, causa de la guerra, sus padres se mudaron a Córdoba, en Argentina, y ahí pasó su infancia. Entonces ella hablaba español como su lengua nativa casi, prácticamente, y español, español argentino que se le escuchaba. Después regresaron a Polonia, sus padres con ella, en una escuela secundaria, entraron en Polonia y empezó, como ya mencionó el profesor Żukowski, los estudios en la Universidad de Varsovia, arqueología. Creo que este fue el comienzo de muchos latinoamericanistas, por lo menos aquí en Varsovia. Hizo su tesis de maestría con el profesor Kazimierz Michałowski y luego también tuvo este paso, bueno, de la región del Viejo Mundo al Nuevo Mundo. Empezó también a hacer viajes con México. Yo he escuchado de uno muy famoso, o tal vez de unos muy famosos, que hicieron con la profesora María Skoczek, con el profesor Ryszard Tomicki y otros, que luego estos viajes siempre estaban en su memoria y nos estaba contando las aventuras y de todo lo que aprendieron durante ellos, pero a la vez eran viajes, obviamente, de aprendizaje, que es cuando aprendía y conseguía bibliografía para su estudio. También estudió con la profesora Maria Frankowska y con el profesor Andrzej Gierczyński. Especialmente la profesora Maria Frankowska es considerada como la que inició los estudios mesoamericanos en Polonia, y Elżbieta siguió y lo expandió más. Trabajó en el proyecto junto con el profesor Stanisław Moniszewski, no está su foto, pero lo tenemos en vivo, en el proyecto Teoría Lunar en la Astronomía Maya. Y bueno, de sus obras más importantes, yo creo que la que más destaca es el libro El tiempo en el Tonalámatl. El libro es complejo, por una parte, porque desarrolla, prácticamente ustedes sabrán mejor que yo, todas las posibilidades de las cuentas y de las convenciones que se pueden hacer gracias a la cuenta Tonalpowali. Y es un libro difícil, pero es un libro que todavía se está explorando y, como se diría en polaco, todavía no ha dicho su última palabra. Pero obviamente es solamente una parte de su trabajo. Aquí vienen otra bibliografía destacada, simplemente para mostrar que es mucha, no voy a hablar de todo. Pero también fue autora de la introducción a la primera edición del libro Popol Vuh, que apareció en polaco, una edición, una introducción que fue de los primeros textos para nosotros los mesoamericanistas para acercarnos al tema de Mesoamérica. También fue autora de varias entradas, tanto a esta enciclopedia que vemos aquí como la enciclopedia del arte antiguo. Esto es importante porque estamos hablando de los que promovieron, bueno, ella como la que promovió los estudios mesoamericanos aquí en Polonia. Por eso estos textos, estas entradas eran tan importantes porque eran nuestros primeros textos que pudimos leer en polaco, no solo nosotros, pero también el público más en general. Estamos hablando de gente, tanto de Elżbieta como de Stanisław, que cuando iban a México a estudiar se pasaban horas y horas y horas sacando fotocopias, porque no tenían libros como nosotros aquí, no tenían los PDFs o ebook como nosotros ahora. Todo era pasarse horas en las bibliotecas, ya sea leyendo, ya sea haciendo copias, y luego ir cargando con mínimo 80 kilogramos de equipaje, intentando pasar por la aduana, la frontera, sin que quitaran alguno. Para mí, estos somos sus alumnos, los que terminamos, los que sacamos doctorado bajo su tutela, por razones ya de salud. No todos terminaron nominalmente con ella, pero sabemos que ella guió todas estas personas que estamos aquí. Agnieszka, la que está ahí presente, está lista para salir porque tiene un examen, pero seguimos todos en la academia, incluso Andrzej Karpowski quien está aquí abajo, aunque no tiene un cargo fijo, sigue trabajando como un investigador independiente. Y bueno, si a mí me toca decir algo más personal de Elżbieta, pues yo tengo un fuerte recuerdo de los encuentros en su casa, llena de libros por todos lados, donde podía, también de humo, por eso está ahí. Siempre con un café enorme, con unas tazas grandes que tomábamos a litros, podría decirse. La casa con adornos, huicholes y de otros lugares de México, con un gato, 2 gatos brincando por ahí. Y en todo esto, unas pláticas largas, larguísimas, de horas, que eran nuestros seminarios, así en privado, casi podríamos decir, y esto era pues, el verdadero contacto entre maestro y alumno, y es lo que le agradezco mucho. Muchas gracias.
And now we will have the small memorial of Mr. August.
Bueno, gracias. Yo también voy a hablar de testimonio, pero necesitamos cerrar esto, abrir la otra presentación. Bueno, damas y caballeros, quisiera presentar muy brevemente una información básica sobre mi difunto, y no solo mío, pero de otras personas aquí presentes en esta sala, amigo Robert Sadowski. El currículum de Robert es un poco distinto de la profesora doctora Elżbieta Siarkiewicz, que ella se ha orientado hacia Mesoamérica, mientras que Robert tenía muchos intereses y colaboraba en varias áreas, pero siempre en todo lo que estaba relacionado con historia de astronomía, porque él era un astrónomo profesional, especialista en historia de astronomía. Era su vocación. Escribió una tesis de maestría en el Instituto de Astronomía de la Universidad de Varsovia sobre uno de los astrónomos ingleses del siglo XVII. De aquí vino su excelente conocimiento del idioma inglés, que, como verán ustedes, tuvo ciertas consecuencias sobre en la obra que voy brevemente referir. Otra cosa que es importante de señalar, la doctora Siarkiewicz era una académica, una persona que desempeñaba importantes cargos, tanto a nivel de la enseñanza como a nivel de representación en gremios científicos nacionales e internacionales. Robert, si bien formaba parte de varias asociaciones, nunca era lo que podemos denominar un frontman. Robert era muy modesto, pero sí hay que subrayar que sin Robert muchos trabajos hasta de quien les habla nunca hubiesen aparecido sin el apoyo. Entonces, de esto hay que recordarse. Él siempre estaba un poco en la segunda fila, no le gustaba, hasta si podía evitar, no quería hablar ante un gran público. Prefería conversaciones hasta unas que duraban horas. Horas avanzadas de la noche y de la mañana sobre diferentes temas, pero en grupos reducidos de amigos y colegas. La obra de uno es lo que él deja detrás de sí, ¿verdad? En especial en publicaciones. Entonces, lo que era lo principal, podemos decir, obra y de cierta manera legado que nos ha dejado Robert son sus publicaciones, porque por las razones que le dije, él nunca había desempeñado un cargo de académico de enseñanza, salvo un corto etapa en su vida, cuando ha dictado un primer curso de astronomía por el cargo del CONCITEC en Lima a mediados de los años 90, 1990. Entonces,
Como notarán ustedes en esta lista, claro, son solo obras selectas, tenemos lado a lado problemas de orientación de los santuarios de Europa oriental, al lado de un trabajo escrito por quien le habla sobre datos astronómicos en una crónica colonial peruana. De aquí pasamos al simbolismo astrológico, principalmente en una de las obras de Jerónimo Bosch, los 7 pecados capitales. Y otra vez pasamos a la interpretación de las cometas de Yupanqui, descritas también en una crónica peruana. En lo que toca exactamente la parte mesoamericana, Robert no ha trabajado en maya prácticamente, salvo las largas discusiones que tuvo sobre este tema con Elżbieta Żółkiewicz, entre otros, y con el profesor Wierciński. Por esta razón quisiera recordarles 2 trabajos de él sobre temas mesoamericanos publicados. Como notarán, aquí hemos pasado todo un abanico de temas. Escrito con Ryszard Tonicki, nuestro excelente colega, sobre la interpretación de un momento muy importante en la historia del Imperio Azteca y de la conquista española. ¿Por qué los españoles decidieron de abandonar Tenochtitlán en una noche precisa, exacta? Y esta investigación, que es relativamente poco conocida, es de suma importancia e interés, porque resulta de esto que en la hueste de Cortés había un astrólogo y que hizo un pronóstico, un horoscopio, sobre el momento más favorable, tal como lo interpretó Robert, que era conocedor de la astrología renacentista de aquella época. El periodo era realmente pésimo, pero esta noche, el 31 de julio, era entre todas las malas la mejor. Y entonces el hecho de que la noche triste ocurrió cuando ocurrió, la debemos a una persona que está en total oscuridad en la historia, que no se la menciona, que era el astrólogo Blas Botello, que dio esta interpretación a Cortés. Entonces, es una cosa de la cual vale la pena recordarse. Bueno, este es, como verán ustedes, el abanico de los trabajos de Robert, pero hay que también señalar otro aspecto de su actividad, que es él estaba traduciendo al polaco varias obras que se publicaban en la prestigiosa serie negra la serie negra que conocen todos ustedes, de Pruszyński, de la editorial Pruszyński, donde aparecieron los principales trabajos, por ejemplo, de Edwin Krupp, de Inga Krendine, sobre los aztecas. Esto apareció en PIB. En fin, gracias a esta labor como traductor de parte de Robert, el público polaco obtuvo un acceso a varias obras básicas para el conocimiento tanto de la cultura, en este caso mesoamericana, como de la arqueoastronomía. Entonces, si estamos haciendo una referencia a sus principales logros, estos están orientados, científicos, están orientados más bien al estado Inca, y aquí he enumerado en resumen las principales obras suyas, con lo que acabo de decir sobre el curso en Concitec. Pero muchos de nosotros, la carrera de muchos de nosotros aquí presentes, hubiera tomado otro rumbo, quizá bien diferente, sin este apoyo, esta ayuda constante de Robert, que estaba dispuesto a contestar a todas las preguntas, hasta las más estúpidas desde su punto de vista como especialista en ciencias puras, que un especialista en ciencias humanas, como por ejemplo yo, podía hacer. Entonces, por esto estoy muy contento de poder compartir este corto recuerdo de Robert con motivo de este simposio. Gracias por mi llamada. Muchas gracias.
Okay, now now it's time to announce our opening lecture guest, Professor Ivan Spice from Slovenian Academy of Arts and Sciences. Okay, here you go.
Well, so I think this is the speech that is open at this conference, and I'm just giving that.
Pues buenos días a todos, es un placer y un honor estar aquí, pero yo voy a hablar en inglés porque así me fue sugerido y me imagino porque va a ser más entendible para algunos de ustedes. So, good morning and many thanks to the organizers. I'm truly honored by this invitation to present a keynote lecture at this event. My astronomy has been studied for a long time, but with two different approaches based on two different types of data. One relies on written evidence on iconography and text in the codices and descriptional evidence, and the other one on architectural orientations. And both approaches have been always somehow disconnected. So I believe that the initiative of this symposium is truly welcome and necessary. I will try to summarize our current understanding of the astronomical significance of Maya orientation, architectural orientations, and then I'll also mention some possible relations with ethnographic records. The quantitative data that I will present are all based on my own measurements, which I did during several years in many Mesoamerican regions. Only in the Maya area I've measured more than 300 orientations. So I think we have a sufficiently large data sample to be able to draw some reliable conclusions. I did that because formerly published alignment data were largely deficient and of low precision. So it was impossible to assess the validity of many hypotheses that were formulated on the basis of those data with that corpus of data. All this research results have been published in several monographs and recently only also in a synthesis published by Stephen Jones of Archaeological Research. So if we see, here's a plot of two histograms, so distribution of azimuths, which are angles in the horizontal plane measured from the north clockwise. So each structure, the orientation of a structure can be described or defined with two azimuths. One is the north-south axis of symmetry and the other one is east-west axis of symmetry. Why is this necessary? Because many Mesoamerican buildings do not have exactly rectangular ground plan. There are many cases they are rhomboidal, so we cannot describe an orientation with one single azimuth. It's always necessary to measure both north-south and east-west. And now if we plot, as I did, the distribution of both north-south and east-west azimuths, what we can see immediately is this already well-known tendency of the Mesoamerican orientations to be skewed clockwise from the north, or east to north, or south to east, however you want to see it. This is something that I believe is a consequence of combination of astronomical concepts, astronomical criteria, and directional symbolism. Because the orientations skewed this way. Those that correspond to the sun record sunrises mostly in the dry season on the eastern horizon, and sunsets on the western horizon recorded by these orientations that have this characteristic skew fall largely in the rainy season. And I believe that this was what the Mesoamericans wanted to achieve, because there's some evidence that the east, there's quite some evidence that the east was conceptually related with the sun, with the heat, with the dry season, and the west with the moon, Venus's evening star, and the wet season. We will see a little bit later and tomorrow about the symbol of Venus and moon. So the other thing that we can see here is that the distribution of east-west azimuths manifests more pronounced concentrations around certain values, which of course means that the orientation must have been functional largely in the east-west direction rather than to the north or south. Now, the azimuth is not a sufficient coordinate to be able to assess possible astronomical significance of any alignment. We have to translate that into declinations. I'm not going to talk about declinations. I think Stanislav tomorrow in the workshop, we will talk more about the concept of spherical astronomy and about methods. But in short, the declination is a celestial coordinate that allows us to identify possible astronomical reference of any alignment. So we have to analyze the declinations rather than azimuths. And here is a cryptogram relative frequency distribution of declinations corresponding to the orientations in Mesoamerican architecture on the eastern and on the western horizon. So we can see immediately that most of these declinations fall within the range of declinations reached by the sun throughout the year. The sun reaches declinations from about 23.5 degrees at summer solstice to minus 23.5 during the winter solstice. So this is the range of solar declinations, and that is also an indication that most orientations in Mesoamerica refer to sunrises and sunsets on certain dates of the year. And there's, of course, another circumstance which supports this conclusion. The percentage of orientations falling within this range of solar declinations is much greater than would have been if they were distributed uniformly or randomly. Obviously, the limits of solar declinations are the solstitial declinations, about plus 23.5 and minus 23.5. And you can see that we do have two groups of orientations recording the solstices. And since the solstices are naturally significant moments of the year, they are easily perceivable by the extremes of solar motion along the horizon. They must have been the most elementary references for orientation in time. And that is also can be seen in many places of the world. European megaliths and some solstitial orientations are common, and in Mesoamerica they tend to be early. We find solstitial orientations throughout the Mesoamerican period, but mostly in early periods. So this is one huge military classic platform from Yashnor, a site that we found in 2004 in the central Yucatan Peninsula. Chiapa de Corzo is also a military classic site, and you can see the whole urban layout is arranged along solstitial axis. And now we could also think, or you might think, that the other significant moment are the equinoxes. And in fact, it has been a popular opinion that many Mesoamerican orientations record the equinoxes. But if this were so, we would have, in this distribution of declinations, we would have a peak or a concentration around zero, because zero is the equinoctial declination of the sun. We don't have that. We have concentrations of about -1 and +1. And these declinations, since the declinations can be translated to dates, all solar declinations can be converted to dates. We can see that this declination, almost +1, corresponds to March 23rd and September 21st, which are not the equinoxes. These are the days that fall 2 days after the vernal equinox and 2 days before the fall equinox. And these are the so-called quarter days of the year because these 2 dates divide, together with the solstices, these 2 dates divide the year into 4 approximately equal periods, 91 days each. And so these 2 days were evidently known in Mesoamerica. They are recorded by many orientations. They can simply be counted. I mean, knowing the solstices and counting the days from one solstice to the other and putting that period in half, we don't get the equinoxes, but rather these 2 days. Why? Well, because of the Kepler's laws. The Earth doesn't travel around the sun along a circular orbit, but rather along an elliptical orbit, changing slightly the speed along the way. So that's astronomical explanation of why these days don't coincide with equinoxes. And the same thing occurs, of course, in only the Maya lowlands solar orientations. We have also a concentration on the eastern horizon of the same, corresponding to the same orientation group, but we don't have any apparently significant, there's no conceivable significance of that other pair of dates, which is about 19th of March and 25th and 26th of September. So we can see these are also early, already in the Middle Preclassic, like Nagbe in the central Yucatan Peninsula, Pochila, another preclassic site in northwestern Yucatan Peninsula, Altar de los Reyes, one architectural group, and they occur in later periods as well, during the Classic period. This is also one example with the photograph along the alignment. So what about those equinoctial orientations? There have been many claims, but even the famous cases like Washington Group E, it's not that we don't have any functional equinoctial alignment here. And this was stated already by Tommy Avini and Horst Hartmann many years ago. They say that this assemblage, this E complex, might have worked as an approximate solstitial observatory, but not an equinoctial one, because here is the equinoctial alignment. So when this central temple was built, the view to the equinoctial sun was blocked by this temple. When the sun appeared, it appeared already to the right of the alignment. So this couldn't have been an equinoctial alignment. And indeed, the whole Group E of Washington is slightly skewed clockwise from cardinal direction. And this is a characteristic of all these quarter day orientations, those that record the sunsets on quarter days on the western horizon. So it is not impossible, but that this complex was actually intended to view sunsets on quarter days from this central temple on the eastern platform over structure 7, which is already a pyramid. Another famous case, of course, the Temple of the Seven Dolls at Itzibir-Chatun in the extreme northwestern Yucatan Peninsula. These are typical, much publicized photographs, equinoctial photographs, but nobody thinks that actually the same photograph can be taken during several days around the equinox, depending on the observation point. So if we view along the axis of symmetry of this temple westward, you can see that the axis of symmetry does not correspond to the axis of this causeway, and it doesn't pass over Stela 3, which would appear to be a convenient observation point. So what's the consequence? That the people that gather here, the multitude gather at the equinoxes, they are actually looking for the most adequate point, which is not marked anywhere. So they are searching for the sun to take that photograph. There we have no archaeological vestige whatsoever of any observation point to see the equinoctial sun. And again, we have the whole complex is slightly skewed northwest and corresponding to the quarter day sunset. And in this case, the holiday sunsets could have been observed quite in a, let's say, a spectacular manner. Because the temple has two windows in the western wall and two smaller openings above the windows. So obviously the sun, as the sun is setting, the solar beams are entering the interior chamber, and they form illuminated rectangles in there, which move along the floor and then rise along the opposite wall. And at the moment of sunset, these illuminated rectangles obviously disappear. But twice a year, they disappear exactly aligned with this pair of windows and small openings in the opposite wall. And this pair of dates is the quarter dates, not the equinoxes. And well, what about the most famous one, the descent of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza? Everybody, I think, has seen this picture, equinox picture. Well, no, this picture was taken on 29th of March. So what happens actually at the equinox? These 9 step bodies are projected on the northern balustrade, and at a certain point, around 1 hour before sunset, 7 triangles or more or less are formed. And then, as the sun is setting, these triangles disappear. But to see what's going on before and after that date, we took many photographs, beginning with March 15th. So you can see here, the whole thing doesn't change much during the whole period. 19, 20, 21, that's the equinox, longitude, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, and even April. This is already 3rd of April, we have even more triangles there. 9th of April, 12th of April. And even, that's the last photograph I have, but even calculations show that around mid-April, we would see 9 illuminated triangles here, which would correspond to the 9 bodies projected there. Because one argument is that at the equinox, there are 7 illuminated triangles which are formed here, and 7 triangles plus 6 intermediate shadows, sum up to 13, which is a symbolically interesting number. Okay, but 9 would also be a symbolically interesting number because 9 layers of the underworld. And besides, the 7 triangles start forming already on the 18th of March. So we have no evidence whatsoever that this phenomenon was actually intentionally achieved. What about the remaining solar dates recorded by rotations? We have 4 concentrations of dates in the year, which correspond to 4 agriculturally significant periods. You have here, February is the time when vegetation is cut down and left to dry. April, May. In April, this vegetation is burned, and then in May, the rainy season starts. It's the time of planting. In August is the time of early, tender maize crops. And in October, November, the rainy season ends and harvest starts. So it's very likely that these orientations actually correspond, they had some relationship with agricultural cycles, but this is not fall. We have to recall that every orientation, every solar orientation or every alignment records on one horizon 2 dates that divide the year into 2 complementary intervals, whose sum is always about 365 days, the length of the tropic period. And the same thing occurs on the western horizon. Let's see. If we start observing at some point, the sun comes to the solstice and returns to the same point. This is the short interval, and then again to the other solstice and back, and this is the long interval, and the sun is always about 365 days. So what turned out is that the intervals that recorded by orientations, by solar orientations, tend to be multiples of 13 and 20 days, or 20 days. So let's see what this is again a frequency distribution of intervals recorded by orientation groups in Maya lowlands. We have to recall that every orientation group of similar orientation, if it records one concentration of dates or intervals on one horizon, it will necessarily correspond to another concentration of dates and intervals on the opposite horizon, even if not necessarily the orientation group was functional in both directions. In many cases, it was only functional in one direction. So if we have one concentration here, we can know that this other concentration of intervals corresponds to the same orientation group. In this case, it is the one that records quarter days of the year. One interval here is 14 times 13, a multiple of 13. And that's what we can observe in all prominent orientation groups in Maya lowlands, and the same thing elsewhere in Mesoamerica. We have a multiple of 20. In this case, in this group, we have even two significant intervals. These are also both significant. One is multiple of 20, the other is multiple of 15, and so on. And the most prominent one, recording one interval of 260 days, which is equivalent to the length of the sacred calendrical cycle. And the same thing can be observed all over Mesoamerica. For different regions, you can see the same characteristic concentrations. And for the Maya lowlands, we even performed some statistical analysis, and for the three most prominent orientation groups, it turned out that they are also statistically significant, over 3 sigmas. So it's very likely that others, which are not statistically significant, were nonetheless achieved on purpose. Now, what could have been the significance of these intervals? Well, let's recall the structure and functioning of the sacred 260-day count. You can see that the intervals that are multiples of 20 days connect the dates with the same sign. You see, when the numbers are advancing in a regular manner. And the multiples of 13 days connect the dates that have the same numeral, and the signs are progressing in a regular manner. So that is most likely what the Mesoamericans and the Maya, including the Maya, wanted to achieve. If they had several orientations at the site and they knew that there was such an interval dividing one date and the other date, they could even predict the other date, even if direct observations were impeded by clouds. And that must have been very important. Let's see one concrete example. The most prominent, the most widespread orientation group in the Maya lowlands and elsewhere in Mesoamerica is the one marking an interval of 260 days from the sun sets from sunrise on February 12th to sunrise on October 30th. And what would be the significance? I believe these were canonical dates of some kind of agricultural cycle. Because we have some ethnographic data from Belize, recorded by Thompson, and from the Chorti recorded by Girard. Girard's data are in many aspects problematic, but they cannot be dismissed outright. So it's interesting that both authors mention ceremonies on February 8th at different places in Maya lowlands, and they are very oriented. This is very close to this orientation group on February 12th. And in both cases, ceremonies with agricultural contents are performed. And in both cases, these ceremonies have nothing to do with Christian ceremonies. So they are of pre-Hispanic origin. And then in other cases, we do have, in many other cases, it is Christian feasts with agricultural symbolism that coincide with many dates recorded commonly by orientations. So we can imagine that many of these saints acquired such a big importance precisely because they were important in pre-Hispanic times. And this we know because such saints like Candelaria, Dia de los Muertos, and others like San Isidro, which all coincide with many dates recorded by orientations, they have even more important agricultural symbolism than in Spain, where they came from. Well, this is also very interesting. The Tzotzi, San Pedro Chenalon, Chiapas, assigned to the agricultural cycle a canonical length of 260 days. They started with a seminal ceremony on February 12th and ended on November 6th. Well, why? Again, we have a date that is very close to the date recorded by orientations. And the other thing interesting is that the Tzotzil still used or used until recently the 365-day calendrical year, which has no intercalations but is frozen in our year, in the Christian year. So, but the interesting thing is that they start agricultural cycle not at the beginning of their year, but on some date which is 10th day of their month, Sisak. So there is no calendrical or formal reason for picking up this date, and we can suspect that this date was chosen as the beginning of agricultural cycle, precisely of the tradition that is based on pre-Hispanic importance of this date. And there are a number of important structures all over the Maya lowlands that exhibit this orientation, and elsewhere in Mesoamerica. Early structures, these heritages appear in the pre-classical. And here we have also a photograph at Chambon. Now you can see here the sun has already moved a little to the right, but this is because the vegetation blocks the view to the horizon. When the sun rose from the horizon, it rose exactly within the axis of this structure. These alignments have their origins apparently in the middle pre-classical period of Central Maya lowlands. At El Mirador, we know the earliest so far known orientations of this group. But then eventually they spread to Central Mexico. We have it at Teotihuacan, at Xochicalco, and many other sites. Now, there are also other dates which were important because obviously if some astronomer priest had many alignments at the site, it was easier to predict the most important dates knowing the structure of this observational calendar composed of calendrically significant intervals. So there are some structures which can be accurately measured, and they all delimit intervals which are multiples of 13 or 20 days. Castillo, the northern, it is facing north from the main facade. If we look westward, we can see sunset on this pair of dates. Both intervals are interesting. Well, of course, one should mention that in every 4 years or so, the observer would have noticed an increase in one of these intervals for 1 day, because the tropical year is a little longer than 365 days. So, but the regular structure would be this one. You would also notice here that the sun is slightly to the right of the facade. Well, yes, it is, but that's because this photograph was taken on May 21st, not on May 20. Why not on May 20? Because in that year we were on May 20 at Tulum, which has, the Castillo Tulum has exactly the same orientation. Now, Becan, in some cases, several cases, we can see that the structures at one site have different orientations, but the dates corresponding to them can be composed in a single observational calendar composed of multiples of 20 or 13 days. Becan structure one is, again, the famous dates. Again, the sun is a little to the right because at the moment of sunrise, it was cloudy. And the other structure, 8 at Becan, records this pair of dates. So both pairs of dates can be composed in a single observational calendar. The 260 days recorded by structure 1, I subdivided by structure 8 in further multiples of 20 days. And exactly the same observational calendar can be reconstructed, for example, for Pomona, of course, with different structures in play. What about intervals? Do we have any independent contextual support for the importance of intervals? Well, we do. The Jacaltec Indians in Guatemala, they designated in the first half of the 20th century the periods of 40 days. They call them Yokhabil, which means steps or feet in the year, obviously because the intervals of 40 days connect the dates that have the same sign, while the numeral advances for 1. And then among the Achi, the 20-day periods and its multiples are important in ceremonial life. And of course, various indigenous groups in Guatemala, highlands, they use the cycle of 2 and 60 days for agricultural purposes. An interesting piece of information is from Michel Poporuka of Oluta, recorded by Walter Lehmann many years ago. They associated the dates April 18th and May 8th with the first rains and the planting of maize in lowlands and highlands respectively. And there's a 20-day period separating this pair of dates. And one of the most prominent orientation groups in Mesoamerica records sunset on 18th of April. So we have several data that fit with what we are finding in orientation. But not everything was astronomy. Astronomical criteria even dictated the location of certain buildings, spatial relationships. So you can see that Temple of the Warriors is again oriented to a couple of dates with the scintilla, but in that along this axis, there's the southern edge of the upper temple of the Jaguars, which might be a coincidence if it really, but it's not. So one very interesting case is Calakmul, structure 1 at Calakmul, one of the two biggest pyramids of the site is oriented to, again, February 12 and October 30 on the eastern horizon. But if we look along the north-south walls of the upper sanctuary, we can see that they are aligned exactly to the pyramid of Danta at El Mirador, which is about 40 kilometers away in Guatemala, but it's sometimes visible. We were lucky one day, and this is the view along the western facade of the upper sanctuary, looking south. So you can see here, very far away, is the Danta pyramid contour on the horizon. So what do they want to, so not everything is astronomy. They have to combine astronomical consideration with some kind of geomancy, sacred geography. Perhaps they wanted to stress that the orientations of this group actually originated at El Mirador, because they are the earliest examples that we know so far. Some time ago, I thought it was attractive that perhaps they wanted to think that they wanted to stress the origin of the Khan dynasty at El Mirador, but this hypothesis is now very little likely, I think, as Nikolai told me some time ago. So we don't know exactly, but El Mirador has the earliest examples so far known of these orientations, and also we have these spatial relationships. Another case is Yashmarka, where we have several structures with the same orientation, but two of them are even placed in such a way that observing from this one, the sunrises on this pair of dates could have been observed over the other structure. At Tikal, where it's also an interesting example, observing from Temple 4 to the east, this is the view. So Temple 3 is placed, observing from the upper sanctuary of Temple 4, is placed exactly in the direction of the solstitial sunrise. The photographs are very bad, but I think that they are illustrative enough that this is a solstitial orientation. And so this is the solstice. And the other thing interesting is that Temple 3 and Temple 1 are oriented in such a way that they record quarter days of the year. So let's see that. This is observing from Temple 3 eastward. We can see that when the sun appears from behind the roof cone, which is more or less of the same height that it used to be originally, it is exactly at the center of the roof cone. And you can see that this photograph was indeed taken from the upper sanctuary of Temple 3. And on the same date, on the same quarter days, if we observe from Temple 1 westward, we see that the sun disappears aligned to the center of the roof of Temple 3. So that also makes sense because we can recall that these quarter days and the solstices they are functionally related because all the 4 dates divide the year into 4 equal periods. But this is not all. So we also have the observing from here, Temple 1 marks sunrises on February 12th and October 30th, which are also already well-known dates. So how could they achieve that? Well, this one is the oldest, Hassan Chankawid. So that one was built by his son apparently in the proper direction. And the last one, the latest one, is Temple 3, which must have been placed at an appropriate location to allow all these alignments. And we can see now, observing from Temple 4 on their sunrises on February 12th, exactly aligned with Temple 1. But again, caution, Temple, the sun is here already quite above the horizon. It is aligned here, but it actually rose here on the horizon. But this is so because this photograph was taken on February 13th, when the sun already moved. Why not on the 12th? Because it was cloudy. And then we have also interesting relationships with the surrounding landscape. Structure 2 of Karakorum, the highest pyramid, is astronomically oriented. Again, we have a significant multiple here. But on the same alignment corresponds to a hilltop on the eastern horizon. It's a small hill. My lowlands don't have prominent mountain ranges, mostly not. This is the same view along the intermediate level of structure 2. And not only that, viewing from above, from the upper central northward, we can see that the axis of symmetry goes to another hilltop on the northern horizon, and structure 7 on the other side of the main plaza is placed exactly along this axis. And on that, we can see that even better along the axis of symmetry of the intermediate structure on structure 2, and on that hilltop there is even a small archaeological site. So obviously, and we have a lot of such cases elsewhere, not so many in Maya lowlands for obvious purposes, but many of them in central Mexico and western Mexico. So this simply cannot be a coincidence, which means since they couldn't put the hill in the appropriate direction, they had to look for the appropriate place from where a building with a more or less rectangular ground plan would mark some astronomical event in east-west direction, and at the same time be aligned to some prominent horizon feature hilltop in the north or southern direction. So, yeah, only now I'm coming to what is actually what we are here for. What are the possible relations with epigraphic records? Well, one thing that we could ask, and I asked myself, is there any correspondence between the dates marked by architectural orientations and calendrical records in associated inscriptions? So far, I have only found one case. It's El Rosario, or in other terms, High Priest's grave at Chichen Itza. So this is one alignment that can be measured quite accurately. It has a column that has double entrance, axis of symmetry, and this axis of symmetry corresponds to this pair of dates. Again, significant interval. And on one of the pillars here, on top of the Rosario, an inscription was found with 2 dates, and one of 2 dates is actually written in the short count, which means that it was 10 count, 2 salts, in the 11th tune of Tuahau Katun. Now, according to Grania parents and colleagues, the only historically possible long count position of this short count date is this one, which would be February 4th, Gregorian 998 Gregorian, and this is the same date that recorded by rendition. The problem is, of course, that this is the only case that I have so far, so this correspondence may well be fortuitous, coincidental, we don't know. Until we have at least a few more such coincidences, we always have to admit the possibility of coincidence. But I mention it because perhaps we can find some other, I don't know. Now, the other question that we can ask is there any similarity between frequency distribution of the dates marked by alignments and of calendrical records in inscriptions? Well, we would need to make a statistical analysis of that, and if such a correspondence were found, of course we could examine iconographic and textual references. Perhaps if there are such references, they might also shed light on the significance of orientations. Nobody has done that. I think it would be worth it. And of course, in these examinations, the period endings ought to be eliminated because they don't, they depend on the round date criteria. But we could also ask, are certain period endings more frequently recorded than other dates? And if so, do their positions in the tropical year coincide with the dates marked by orientations? Again, something to be investigated. I don't know, this is just a suggestion. And there have been some mentions of such coincidences. Michael Grover mentions that February 8 to 9 is frequently referenced at Copan and other sites, so you can see here the examples. He says that these are the Copan February solar Navi dates. I don't believe in Navi. I'll show you why. But first of all, because it's not directly observable. We can extrapolate the date when the sun transits the Navi, but every indirect extrapolation will reach an erroneous date, or it will be more or less accurate just by coincidence. So there are, according to Grover, several dates that do correspond to these, several dates that actually correspond to the dates that we have. You can see actually the most prominent alignment group is February 12th, but there are also other orientations that record February 9th. Not so prominent, but there's a small bump here. Let's see why I don't believe in non-yield passages. First of all, I don't believe that there were orientations recording either non-yield passages of the sun or zenith passage days of the sun. Although the idea that many orientations record the days of zenith passage has been very popular, it still is. So to test this idea, I elaborated this scatter plot where the declinations recorded by solar orientations are compared with latitudes of sites. Why that? Well, because the zenith passage of the sun is defined as the day when the sun's declination is equal to the latitude of the site. And the nadir passage of the sun is defined as the day when the latitude of the sun is equal to the declination of the sun with a negative sign. So that's what we have here. These dashed lines connect the points where the declination is equivalent, or the absolute value of declination is equivalent to the latitude of the sun. So in the practice of orienting structures to the days of zenith or nadir passages of the sun have been common, we would have a concentration of points along these two lines, which is not the case. We have some small concentrations, but even in these cases, it is unlikely that they were intended to record nadir or zenith or zenith passages, because you can see that we have the same declinations recorded also on other latitudes. So there must have been some latitude-independent criteria for orienting these buildings. And in fact, most of these orientations can be explained in terms of intervals, as I mentioned before. Oh, then it is also, it has been mentioned that the decapitation of Mashak Lahornu Achawil et Giriwa, corresponding to May the 3rd, is related to the solar zenith. That's not impossible, because the only thing I wanted to say is that we know that zenith passages were important in Mesoamerica. There's plenty of ethnographic and ethnohistoric evidence. What I wanted to say is that we have no proof that the positions of the sun on the horizon on those dates were important. And so in this case, yes, we have some devices for observing the zenith passage of the sun at noon. So it's not impossible here, but I don't think, because May the 3rd is not exactly the zenith passage on the latitude of Kiriwa. And what is, in my opinion, much more likely is that this date was important for other reasons, because we have, again, orientation, a group of orientations recording this date, and we can recall it. May the 3rd is still the Holy Cross festival, very important day, beginning of rains, planting season, and so on. And the last thing, of course, what should or could be investigated, what was the function of all those tables of multiples that we have in codices? There are many, in many cases, the multiples are multiples of 13 and 20. Could it be that some of those tables actually served as aids for predicting those dates recorded by orientations? I don't know. Perhaps there is some iconographic context or textual context that might shed light on this question. But it's something that perhaps could be researched. The results might be, in all these cases, negative. But until we do that, we don't know. But it's possible that we will have absolutely negative results. I mean, for example, in Europe, we know that the Christian churches, until Renaissance, were largely oriented on astronomical grounds. Some of them to the patron saint's day, some of them to the sunrises or sunset on certain liturgically important dates. But in written sources, we don't have any explicit evidence about that. It was kind of an esoteric knowledge. And just to finish about the orientations, we also have lunar and Venus orientations in Mesoamerica, but they are less relevant for our purposes here, and I'll mention why. Just in short, the moon moves very rapidly along the horizon. In 1 month, it runs from one extreme to the other and back. But these extremes are not always the same. They expand and they shrink. So every 18.6 years, the moon reaches the major extremes or major lunar standstills. And after 9.3 years, the minor extremes are reached. And again, after 9.3 years in the major extremes. So the interval of these extremes is 18.6 years. And the extremes are like 5 degrees larger than the solstitial extremes of the sun. So here we do have quite a few such orientations. We also have some contextual evidence that supports the intentionality of these orientations. The most interesting case is the greatest concentration of these lunar orientations is found on the northeastern coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, which is known to have been a very important focus of the goddess Ischel, which was, among other things, also related to the moon. And we have evidence from Spanish chroniclers from the early 16th century about pilgrimages and so on. And we have also iconographic evidence for that. Now, the problem, of course, is that lunar standstills don't have any permanent dates. The dates are very variable. So I don't think that we could find any systematic correspondence in inscription, or perhaps just very specific dates. But we would need some contextual support, some mentioning, some reference to the moon to be able to suggest that they were trying to record the lunar extreme. So that's something that I don't know how to see any relationship with any systematic relationship with epigraphic records. And something similar applies to Venus extreme. Venus also reaches its extremes, but it's interesting that on the eastern horizon, the morning star extremes are virtually, they don't come much beyond the solstitial extremes. While on the western horizon, Venus, the evening star, can reach about 3 degrees beyond the solstitial sun. That's about 6 diameter of the sun, so that's quite noticeable. And the most important thing is that all these extremes are seasonally fixed. The northerly extremes always occur in April, June, before the summer solstice, which is the beginning of the rainy season, planting season, and the southern extremes between October and December, before the winter solstice. And these are, of course, the beginning and the rain and the end of the rainy season. So I believe that this was the most important observational basis for a well-documented conceptual relationship of Venus, particularly the evening star, with rain, maize, and fertility in Mesoamerica. We have a lot of different kinds of evidence. What's also interesting is that all these extremes are not at the same sites. every 8 years, Venus reaches the major extremes. I will talk more about that tomorrow, about the mechanics of Venus motion. And those extremes were recorded by sun orientations. And here we can see that we have declinations corresponding to lunar extremes, major extremes. We also have declinations corresponding to minor extremes, but in this case it's again difficult to suggest or to be sure that the moon was intended, because these declinations can well be related to the sun. In fact, in many cases they correspond to some solar orientation. And then we have here another bump, which corresponds to the approximately to the maximum declination of Venus. Why approximately? Because again, there are secular variations in the maximum declination. So Venus, I'll talk about that tomorrow. Now, the major extremes of Venus always occur around May the 1st and November the 1st. But to find that, those references in description will again be difficult, because those are the dates that are also recorded by the sun. So if we don't have any explicit reference to Venus, it's hard to say anything of such a relationship. Just to finish, one example of a very clear Venus orientation is the Palace of the Governor in Tushpan, oriented to the major northern extreme of Venus, and we have quite some contextual iconographic support for this opinion, because we have almost 400 Venus glyphs which are still conserved on the facade of the palace, and they are placed in the cheek of the rain and earth and fertility god Chak, which of course makes sense, because the orientation of the palace recorded northerly extremes of Venus, which announce or coincide with the beginning of the rainy season. And then, since 5 synodic periods equal 8 years, it's most likely not a coincidence that the Chak masks are arranged in group of 5. 5 and 8 are Venus numbers par excellence. So we have 5 Venus 5 charts in these cascades, stacked, 5 in diagonal lines, and above the central entrance, we have 8 bicyclic dragons. Number 8 is another Venus. And at the 2 northern corners, there are Chak masks with the number 8. 5 and 8 are Venus numbers par excellence. So I haven't seen that, but what could have been done is also to observe these phenomena from a small site, Kektsuk, about 4.5 kilometers east of Uxmal. And this photograph, well, as you can guess, this photograph was taken many years ago. And there's Uxmal behind, and there's the Palace of the Governor. Venus would have set at every northern extreme somewhere behind the palace, because the extremes are of different magnitudes. But every 8 years, Venus would have set right behind the northern edge of the palace, every 8 years. So it's perhaps not a coincidence that we have those numerals 8 precisely at the 2 northern corners of the palace. So that's as much as I can say. Not much has been suggested about possible relations with epigraphic records, but perhaps we can do eventually something. Very much. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, I believe we do have some time now to have some questions asked, so I would like to, if somebody from the audience has some questions, I would be very happy to pass the microphone.
Okay, I think like everybody is a little bit hungry simply.
So, I would like to announce a lunch break commencing now, and we will reunite in this very room at 2 p.m. Thank you very much, and after the lunch break, we will see Professor Nikolai Gruber and Professor Ivan Chesky. W sensie Kajetan, tak? Przyjechał. Tutaj jest mój kolega.
Jak pan weźmie kluczyk delegacji od tutaj od pani Krysi, wypełnimy tą delegację i rozliczymy to delegację.
Dobrze.
Zresztą tam dał tutaj co?